My youngest son called me at 2:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake anyway, sitting in the dark in my den, listening to the rain hit the windows. Couldn't sleep. Hadn't been sleeping well for months, though I hadn't let myself think too hard about why. I picked up on the first ring. Dad. His voice was flat in a way that made my chest tighten. Not panicked. Controlled. The way he sounds when something is very wrong and he's working to stay professional about it. I know that voice. I raised him. What happened? Is Renata home? Renata, my daughter-in-law, my son's wife. Not what I expected him to ask. She went to bed hours ago. Why? Don't turn on any lights. Don't go upstairs. I need you to go to your garage and get in your truck. Lock the doors. And call me back from there. Do it now, Dad. Don't ask questions yet. I've been a homicide detective for 31 years. I retired at 62, 4 years ago, with a bad knee, a good pension, and more nightmares than I care to count. In all that time, I learned one thing better than anything else. When someone with good instincts tells you you move first and ask questions later. I moved. I took my phone, my keys, and my reading glasses off the side table. Don't ask me why the glasses, habit I guess. And I walked through my dark house in my socks, through the kitchen, into the garage, and got in my truck. Locked it. Sat in the black with the rain drumming on the roof. Called him back. Okay, I said. Talk. What he told me took 20 minutes. By the end of it, my hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. I'm not a man who shakes easily, but sitting in that dark garage, hearing what my own son had uncovered, I understood why he'd called me at 2:47 in the morning. I understood everything. Let me back up. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago. Breast cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Worst 14 months of my life, and I've stood over a lot of bad scenes. We'd been married 38 years. After she was gone, the house felt like a building where someone had turned off all the heat. Still standing, nothing working right. My son, I'll call him my son, that's who he is, works for the county prosecutor's office. He's 34, sharp, serious, the kind of young man who reads case files on vacation. He got the analytical gene from his mother and the stubbornness from me. He lives about 20 minutes away with Renata, who he married 5 years ago. My daughter, she's 31, married a man named Aldous 2 years back. I'll be honest with you, I never liked Aldous. There was something slippery about him that I couldn't pin down, and after 31 years reading people for a living, I've learned to trust that feeling. He had a salesman's smile, always knew the right thing to say, always had an explanation ready before you'd finished asking the question. But my daughter loved him, and she was happy, or she seemed happy, and I told myself that was enough, that my read on people didn't extend to my own family, that I was being a suspicious old man. That was my first mistake. About a year after Carol died, my daughter and Aldous started coming around more. I thought it was kindness. They'd bring dinner on Sundays. Aldous would offer to help with things around the house. Gutters, the busted fence gate, the water heater that made a noise. I appreciated it. I was grieving and tired, and 60 years old, and I let myself be helped. I should have paid attention to what kind of help it was. Slowly, without me noticing the shape of it until much later, Aldous started inserting himself into my finances. First, it was small things. My daughter mentioned I was having trouble figuring out the online banking portal. Aldous offered to walk me through it. Then he was handling a billing dispute with my insurance company because I found the phone call frustrating. Then he was suggesting a different investment advisor. A friend of his, very good guy, really knows retirement accounts. Then he was co-signing on a refinanced home equity line because the rate was supposedly better and it would give me more flexibility. I signed things I shouldn't have signed. I want to be clear about that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was some helpless old man who didn't know what he was doing. I knew what I was signing. I just trusted the wrong person to be honest with me about what it meant. The investment advisor, the friend of Aldous's, his name was Lofton. Carey Lofton. I met him twice. Seemed competent, moved my savings into some kind of private equity fund he managed. I didn't ask enough questions. When you're grieving and someone trustworthy is standing next to someone who seems trustworthy, you extend credit you shouldn't. It took me too long to notice the statements didn't quite add up. By the time I started paying close attention, 18 months had passed. I had a legal pad where I'd written down dates and numbers, and something felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately articulate. But I knew that feeling. I'd had it on cases before. The feeling that there's a pattern hiding underneath what you're looking at. I didn't say anything to my daughter yet. I didn't say anything to anyone. Old habit. You don't tip your hand before you know what you've got. What I didn't know was that my son had already started looking. He'd noticed something at Thanksgiving, something my daughter said offhandedly about the house, about it being in a trust now. For tax purposes, Aldous had explained it all. My son didn't say anything at the table either. But he went home and he started pulling on threads. That's what he told me in that dark garage at 3 in the morning. Kerry Lofton was not a licensed investment advisor. He'd had his license revoked in 2 states. The private equity fund was, as far as my son's contact at the state securities division could tell, essentially a vehicle for collecting fees and shuffling money. My retirement savings, $470,000 that Carol and I had spent a lifetime building, were in something that existed mostly on paper. The house trust was worse. Aldous had convinced me to put the house into a revocable trust, which I'd agreed to, but the language in the documents I'd signed. Documents I had not read carefully enough, and I will carry that particular shame for the rest of my life, included a provision that named Aldous as successor trustee in the event I became incapacitated. There was also, my son had discovered, a quitclaim deed prepared but not yet filed. It was sitting in a file somewhere waiting. He's planning to file it, my son said. I don't know when, but he's got it ready. Does your sister know? Silence. Long enough that I had my answer before he gave it. I think she knows some of it. I don't think she knows all of it. But Dad, I found emails on a shared account she has access to. I sat in my truck and looked at the wall of my garage. Carol's gardening tools were still hanging on the pegboard. She'd labeled everything with a label maker. Trowel, pruning shears. I never moved them. Okay, I said. I've talked to someone at the DA's office, not officially. Off the record, for now. What Lofton is doing may be securities fraud. What Aldous is doing with the deed may be attempted deed fraud, which is a felony in this state. But we need to be careful about how we move. If they find out, we know. They won't, Dad. They won't find out I know how to work a case. I took a breath. Who knows you've been looking? Just my contact. And now you, Renata? Another pause. I haven't told her yet. She and your daughter are close. I didn't want to. That was the right call. I thought for a moment. Does Aldous have access to this house? He has a key. You gave it to him last year. I had. For emergencies. All right, I said. Here's what we're going to do. I want to tell you that I felt some version of rage that night. And I did. It was there, underneath everything, a quiet and cold kind of fury that I recognized from my years on the job. The specific anger you feel when someone has used trust as a weapon. But mostly what I felt was clarity. The same clarity I used to feel when a case finally showed you its shape. You stop feeling things and you start thinking. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. By the time the sun came up, I had a list. The first thing I did was call my attorney. I'd used Wendeline Pryor for 20 years. She was 70, sharp, and did not suffer fools. I explained the situation. She told me to come in that afternoon and to bring every document I could find related to the trust, the home equity line, and the investment account. I came in with a box. She spent 2 hours reading. When she was done, she took off her glasses and looked at me. The quitclaim deed. You said it hasn't been filed. Not yet. Then we need to revoke this trust and get a new one drawn up immediately. Today. With a trustee who is not your son-in-law. That's what I want. The investment situation is more complicated. We'll need to loop in a securities attorney. I have someone. Do it. She also advised me, very calmly and directly, to change the locks on my house within 24 hours and to not inform Aldous that I'd done so. I'd already planned to. I'd called a locksmith from the truck that morning before I even came inside. The locks were changed by 11. I had the new keys in my pocket. 3 days later, I met with my son and the securities attorney at Wendline's office. The picture that emerged was this. Kerry Lofton had run a similar scheme in 2 other states, and there was already a federal investigation open, though it hadn't yet touched him in our state. My son's contact had made a call. Now it had. As for the deed fraud, the county DA's office was interested. Very interested. There was a detective, younger than my son, Ernest Thorough, who interviewed me for 2 hours. I gave him everything I had. The documents, the timeline, the emails my son had preserved. The detective had the look of someone who understood what they were holding. The hard part hadn't happened yet. My daughter called me on a Tuesday evening, the week after I'd revoked the trust. Cheerful, Normal, asking if I wanted to come to dinner Saturday. I said yes. I drove over Saturday. Aldous grilled steaks. He was relaxed, easy, that same salesman's warmth turned up to the usual setting. He didn't know the locks were changed. He didn't know the trust was revoked. He didn't know that 2 federal investigators had driven down from the state capitol to interview Carrie Lofton the previous Thursday. I sat at their kitchen table and ate a steak and talked about baseball. I have never worked harder in my life than I worked that evening, staying exactly the same. The arrest came on a Wednesday morning, about 3 weeks later. Lofton first at his office. Aldous was picked up at home 2 hours after that. Securities fraud, conspiracy, and attempted deed fraud. My son called me as soon as he heard. I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the birds at the feeder Carol put up the year before she got sick. "It's done, Dad." "Good." My daughter called me 40 minutes later. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she didn't know. She said Aldous had told her it was all legal, that it was all for my benefit, that the trust was to protect me. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry. I listened to all of it. I didn't say much. I told her we'd talk later. I meant it. I just needed a few days to figure out what I actually felt before I said anything I couldn't take back. She came to my house 5 days after the arrest. She sat on my couch, the same couch we'd sat on for 31 years of her life, when she was a little girl watching Saturday morning cartoons, when she was a teenager doing homework, when she came home from college on breaks, and she cried and talked for a long time. I let her finish. Then I said, "What did you know, and when did you know it?" She didn't look away from me when she answered, which mattered. She said she knew the trust had been set up. She thought it was estate planning. She hadn't asked enough questions. She had seen the emails, some of them, but Aldous had explained them in a way that made them sound routine. She wanted to believe the explanation. "You wanted the money," I said. "You don't have to dress it up." She flinched, but she didn't argue. "I know," she said. We sat in silence for a while. "I want you to understand something," I told her finally. "I built what I had. Your mother and I worked our whole lives. We never had expensive tastes. We just saved. That money was supposed to be my last years of independence. It was supposed to be what kept me out of someone else's hands when I got too old to manage alone. And someone used you to get to it. I'm not entirely sure how much of that is on you and how much is on him, but some of it is on you." She nodded. She was crying again quietly. "What happens now?" she asked. I told her. The civil attorney I'd hired, Wendeline, had recommended someone who specialized in financial elder abuse, believed I had a strong case for full recovery of the investment losses. The criminal case would take its own course. Aldous's public defender had already reached out about a possible plea, and me, she said. "What happens with us? That's up to you," I said. "Not me. I'm your father and I'll love you until I don't have a breath left. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them stand next to someone who tries to take everything from you and pretending I didn't notice. You have to decide who you are now, after all this." She left an hour later. At the door she hugged me, and I hugged her back. I meant it. But when I closed the door and went back to my chair, I sat there for a long time without moving. You spend your career watching what people do to each other. The worst of it, usually. You think it inoculates you against being surprised. It doesn't. Nothing prepares you for looking at someone you've known their whole life, someone you held when they were hours old, and understanding that they looked the other way while someone took a piece of your life. The months that followed moved slowly and then quickly in the way that legal proceedings do. Aldous took a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison, 3 years probation, full restitution ordered as part of the sentence. He'd be 43 when he got out. My daughter filed for divorce the week after the plea was entered. Lofton's case was more complicated. The federal investigation swept in several other victims. Total losses across multiple states exceeding $2 million. He was looking at a much longer sentence. My civil attorney filed separately against Lofton and the fund entity. The civil judgment came through in the fall. Not everything. You never get everything back. There are fees and there's what's simply gone, but enough. Enough that the number in my account felt like something again. Like the future my wife and I had planned. My son came over the evening after the judgment. He brought takeout, which we ate at the kitchen table, which is our tradition when something big happens, and we don't feel like marking it too formally. He asked me how I felt. "Tired," I told him. "Mostly tired," he nodded. He understands me well enough not to push past that. You know what I keep thinking about, I said. What? Your mother would have caught it earlier. She had a better nose for people than I ever did. I always thought I was the one who read people. 30 years in homicide, I know how humans work. But she could have sat across from Aldous at one Sunday dinner and known something was wrong. I'm sure of it. He smiled a little. She probably would have. We finished dinner. He washed the dishes, which he's been doing since he was 12 years old, standing on a step stool. I dried. Same's as always. That night, I sat in the den for a while after he left. The same room where I'd been sitting when the phone rang at 2:47 in the morning. The rain was gone. It was a clear November night, cold, and the stars were out over the backyard. Carol's gardening tools were still on the pegboard in the garage. I still hadn't moved them. My daughter sends me text every few days. Nothing long. Just checking in. Telling me about small things. A movie she saw. Something funny that happened at work. She got a new job, started therapy twice a week. She's paying her own rent for the first time in her adult life, she said, and it feels different than she expected. Harder and better at the same time. I text back. Not much. But I text back. There's a version of this story where the ending is clean. Where the money all comes back and the family heals and everyone has learned something tidy and we move forward whole. That's not quite the ending I got. The ending I got is more like this. I'm 66 years old. I sleep a little better now than I did a year ago. And I still have my house. Still have my independence. Still have the thing I wanted most, which is to finish out my life on my own terms, in my own space, without anybody else's hand on the controls. I still have my son, completely. I have my daughter, partially, in a way that might become more over time. I have the memory of my wife, which is the most valuable thing I own, and the only thing nobody can ever touch. Some mornings I sit on the back porch and watch the birds at the feeder, and I think about the fact that the worst year of my life, after the year Carol died, started with someone taking advantage of the fact that I was grieving, that I was tired, that I wanted to believe my family had my best interests at heart. That turned out to be both true and untrue at the same time, in ways I'm still sorting out. What I know is this. You don't stop being someone just because someone tried to make you nothing. I walked into burning buildings for a different kind of work, but the principle is the same. You don't lie down. You find out what's happening, you document it, you go through the right doors in the right order, and you come out the other side still standing. That's all I know how to do. It's enough.